I've Got a Cool Job, Aurora Public Library's interview series where we talk to professionals who perform interesting work. I'm Sam Marcello, and with me this week is Paul Shkreli. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous because you're my one conventional interview this year, and I love it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I love talking to everybody. I'm kind of a chatterbox. So just to give everyone a kind of a brief intro, Paul is a lawyer, father, writer, and avid gamer. He loves spending time with his family, enjoys writing for rpgamer.com in his spare time, and is a big Sailor Moon fan, which that is one of the things Paul and I have bonded on a few times. We love our Sailor Moon.
Oh, yeah. My kids love it too.
So who is your best girl from Sailor Moon?
Probably Sailor Venus. I named my daughter after her.
Oh, that's adorable. Named her Mina?
Yep.
I love it. See, I've always been a big Mako girl myself. Sailor Jupiter, we love the Sailor Jupiter in this household.
There's something to love about everybody.
They're all adorable. It's one of the best childhood shows that I think, like, I'm rewatching it now as an adult and I'm like, no, this show is still wonderful and I love everything about it.
We're really lucky because we have the version that we watched when we were children that I personally am not able to go back and watch. And then it was like when reboots started getting real crazy about 7 years ago, they had announced that they were redubbing it. So it's been amazing to come back 20 something years later as an adult and see it from a completely different perspective. That's very faithful to the original and be able to use it to introduce it to my children as well. Although my 3-year-old did tell me, she was like, I was watching it with grandma and she turned it off because one of the bad guys used a curse word.
I love it. Which, yeah, when you think back to that old Deke dub, they probably didn't have anything like that compared to the Viz one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nope. I didn't hear any of that language.
How dare they use curse words?
You know what? It's not. It wasn't anything like so bad that you wouldn't want them repeating it on a playground.
Fair enough. So, Paul, why did you decide to become a lawyer, and what drew you to the profession?
So I knew at a very young age that I wanted to be an attorney. I have no idea what exactly made me want to do it. I always knew that I would do something involving writing and research. So I knew that I would either be some sort of journalist, some sort of attorney. I didn't want to go into academia necessarily. So it just kind of seemed like law would be where I would be headed towards. And growing up, I was always interested in like mysteries and kind of like trying to like crack things open or approach them from different perspectives. And so that's something that I've always done is even now as an adult, and it's kind of like served me well. So yeah, I remember my mom used to come home and she'd come home from work and it would be like, my parents had a restaurant and my mom would come home and it'd be like 10 o'clock and I just finished watching like 2020 and I would like recap the news stories for her and like giving her just like a breakdown. And it's something that I'm still able to do now, able to give everyone just a really quick digest of what's happening. And it serves me well in my professional life too.
Oh, I love that. That is adorable. So you were the kid that went, Mom, just so you know, on 2020, this happened.
I had like a box of like my investigator tools, and it was like note cards and like a magnifying glass and just like a little map. And it was, I just would be in my backyard, like rummaging through the woods, like just trying to like find some sort of thing to generate like some sort of like mystery off of. Like I was one of the Hardy Boys.
Oh, that is delightful.
Yeah.
So how long have you been practicing law then?
I graduated from law school. I went to Michigan State University College of Law. I graduated in 2012. So, and then I was licensed in January 13th. So it's almost been a decade, which is crazy because I remember studying for the bar exam like it was yesterday. You look on social media and it'll give you reminders of things you were doing like 10 years ago. And I'm coming up to the point where 10 years ago, I was not even a student. So that's, I'm definitely approaching some sort of like internal crisis. Thanks for bringing it up.
Oh, come on now. It's a beautiful milestone. And I mean, I wonder like how many cases then you've since done, that's got to be a lot.
It's impossible to track. Hundreds, criminal, civil, all sorts of random things. Yeah, it's definitely up there. And you definitely forget a bunch of them, but there's like facets of cases that you'll remember, or things that will remind me of cases like years later, and it will either bring a smile to my face or a very deep frown.
I love that. So, what kind of educational background does one need to be a civil or criminal lawyer?
In the United States, it's pretty wide open. You don't need to have any sort of formal training prior to law school. So I was a psychology major in undergraduate studies, and the only thing I had to do was take the LSAT. It's a standardized test, logic games mostly, if I remember correctly. So you'd have to take that test, you get a score, then you'd have to just basically apply like any other graduate program. And then from there, you go and you weren't even picking specializations necessarily. So it was a fairly broad range of studies that were coming into law school. I remember some of my closest friends, I had an art history major, someone with a medical background, a lot of soft sciences, things like that. If you wanted to do some sort of like intellectual property or like patent law, you'd most likely have an engineering background, but that's not something that I ever worried about.
So then out of curiosity, what drew you then specifically to doing civil and criminal law?
So one of the things that kind of drew me to law school always was just the notion that a lawyer is supposed to help people. It's hard because people like say, why do you want to go to law school? It's like really hard to kind of like distill that down to some sort of essence. And I was always kind of intrigued by the idea of being able to use my brain to defend myself, or to be able to use it to use it essentially, to use it if I needed to. And so being able to use my power to help empower others to defend themselves, or be able to understand things or figure things out is really fulfilling to me. So in that sense, helping people out from a criminal perspective, there are lots of people who had legal problems when they were younger, or had one, very minor brush ups with the law, who then, years later are having issues getting jobs because of a blemish on their record or something like that. So I'm always really happy to help friends or family who tell me that they want to do sort of an expungement or something off their criminal record. And civilly, it's really hard to understand a lot of the things that happen in the world. And so sometimes people can feel like they're being taken advantage of. So to help people kind of understand what's going on, and to negotiate those areas and facets of the life that they're otherwise unfamiliar with is something that I've always enjoyed.
I feel like in a lot of ways, lawyers and librarians kind of have similar mandates. The goal is ultimately to help your community, help people. And I mean, I find that kind of fascinating in a lot of ways, because it is, in a lot of ways, it's our civil duty in our professions to empower people, to give people access to information, to give people access to things that can help them in the long run, whether it is education or the ability to, again, take away, a misdemeanor or something so that somebody can get a job. And I mean, we see all kinds of walks of life in libraries, from people who are former jailbirds who are just trying to figure out how they can, get a job, to new immigrants who are coming in, making sure that they're not getting taken advantage of. So what you do is very valuable. And it's something that, as a person who works in the library, I can definitely connect with. And I feel where you're coming from, for sure.
I relate to that so well, because you see the signs where it's saying like attorney and counselor, and I always have clients who will tell me they'll thank me, or they'll be really appreciative because I sat down and like explained something to them in very simple terms, or I tell them like, my job is to worry about this problem for you. I can't go back in time and I can't change something that you did or something that someone else did. I can't tell you what's going to happen in the future. I'm like, but I can help you make the best sense of what's happening now and try to help you make the best informed decision on what you want to do with it and how to go from there. So in that sense, yes, it's very similar, because someone coming up to your desk or someone coming up to mine, there's only a finite number of things that I'm able to do. Hopefully I'm able to send them off into the right direction with the information that they need to be able to advocate for themselves, or have me advocate for them, basically. So I understand. I like vibe with that so well, especially with like pro bono opportunities. I did legal aid, and when I was coming up in law school, I try to volunteer with opportunities to provide pro bono services. And obviously there'll be times where I'm not super well versed in some areas of like common law, like landlord tenant, things like that, the things that people really need help with on an everyday basis. The ability to just sit there and help make sense of something to someone is sometimes all that they really need, and to help them just kind of explain a few of the more complicated nuances of things. Or even if you ultimately tell them at the end of the day, like, I sat down, I looked at everything that you have, to tell them that they're wrong, it's not something you want to tell them. Sometimes it's something that they need to hear, though.
Oh, absolutely. And those are always the hard and crushing things to do. So what role do you feel the rule of law plays in a functioning society? So why do we have the law and why do we need lawyers?
It goes back to what we were just talking about. Basically, it's everyone is in the sandbox together, and we're on our own journeys, and we're figuring out the how we want to live the life that we want to live, and basically we all have to get by according to the same rules and paradigms, and basically we fill that same sort of void. We're not necessarily going to change the game, or we're not going to be able to change your facts or circumstances. We can't create the facts, but we can help shine a light or be that guidepost to help bring people to the realization that they eventually need to come to. And I think, we talk about so much of like the politicization, excuse me, I'm stammering, of the legal system. We've certainly seen a lot of that in America over the last year. And it's just something that I think that attorneys have a duty, they really swear to that duty when they take that oath to become attorneys, to represent the law and to represent their profession the best that they can, even when they're not necessarily in court. So one of the reasons I was happy to take this opportunity to talk to you was just to kind of show that, lawyers are everyday people, and we are all part of the system. And at the end of the day, like, I value what I do because I think that I am able to help people.
Well, and that's a noble cause. I mean, I think most people who get into the profession of law, like, that is the first and foremost thing that you want to do. Is you do want to help people. You want to have the ability to do right to your community, right?
Absolutely.
So is there any other kinds of law that you're particularly enthusiastic by?
So I'm really interested in election law, because we're seeing a lot of things happening in America regarding the right to vote, impediments to the right to vote. We're still seeing a lot of litigation after the last November's election, which is kind of interesting. Most people, the news cycle, most people aren't paying attention to it. I'm still on very much so in election Twitter. I'm also really kind of interested to see how when the law kind of collides with my other interests, including video games. I'm always really interested in that. Like when the Epic versus Apple lawsuit was going on this year, I found that to be really fascinating.
Oh, between that and the Blizzard one with the state of California, I've been on the edge of my seat watching just how those lawsuits are going to change the industry, and they will. People don't recognize.
They should. Yeah,
absolutely. What are some challenges that come with working in law?
Before I answer that, I just want to go back to the prior point about where we're seeing a lot in so many industries, where we're seeing lots of problems that have been longstanding and systemic, kind of rearing their heads to the forefront because of technology, because people are now shining the light on that. So it's against that same theme of like people taking the power for themselves. And I'm really interested to see how this relates in my industries, both my personal and professional industries. So then kind of now answering your question, people really have a hard time realizing that how slow processes take. It's like, I can't make anything happen overnight ever, unless you want me to like bake you a cake. And even then, I don't know if I can do that. So you have, and people come to you at the 11th hour, and it's like, you should have been here a couple hours ago. So it's always hard to tell someone no, because it's like, I can't make your problem my own at the 11th hour. I can make, I want to do something competently. I need the time to prepare adequately and to be able to give you all of those options. So, and it's hard for me to say no. It's a personal problem. And so it's really hard for me not to want to take someone's problem, make it my own, and then make it the only thing I focus on. But it's like, you can't do that. You have to have that barrier.
No, and that's, oh my God, again, librarians, we are the same thing. We have a problem sometimes of telling people no, even though we know there were situations where we literally can't help somebody. Like we can try to point them in the right direction, but you can tell that that person really just wants you to take away the problem and make it your own. And it's like, I can't. And that's really hard to do. And I suffer the same problem. It's very hard for me to say no in some situations, especially like anyone who's downtrodden or, you know, the elderly. Oh my God, I have a hard time saying no to the elderly. Because sometimes you're just like, I just want to give you what you need and hope and empower you. And sometimes it's hard. It really is. I know for me personally, it's one of those things where, you know, when you grow up in a culture, being Italian, for example, you're told not to say no because you want to help everybody. And there are days where I'm like, I know I can't actually fix this problem. There is no way I can. And I feel like people forget, and I love that you pointed this out. Politics and law are slow. So when Twitter is yelling, fix now, they don't recognize that the process for everything, you know, the process is slow because you have to dot every I and cross every T and make sure that you've done your due diligence. And I mean, for you, it's probably the same every day. It's like, I know this is a problem. This is going to take me a little bit to get to X so I can help you.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The joys of slow moving politics, slow moving litigation, but it's all necessary. Like, again, you don't want to do something too quickly and then, you know, something gets messed up, right? Or it comes back on you. Again, doing research for many years, it's like, no, you got to take your time with this stuff. Absolutely. All right. Are there any particularly strange laws that you've run into in your career? I mean, living in Michigan, I feel like there has to be a couple like gems of weird laws.
So one of the very first cases that I worked on doing like some sort of pro bono criminal defense for a local court was involving a woman who was begging for change outside of a local grocery store, and she was cited for it. She was given a criminal charge for it. And so, you know, they give you this case and they're expecting you basically just get it pled out, you know, and have something, tell them what the charge is, get some sort of plea that, you know, everyone can live with and get it out the door. And I like took some sort of like First Amendment argument, like filed like these briefs and was like, you know, this should be dismissed. We all, you know, we ended up resolving it for like a like a civil infraction. So there's no criminal charge. But, you know, then I saw a couple years later that a very similar case had worked its way all the way to the state Supreme Court regarding limitations on where you can place limitations on people begging for money as like a First Amendment violation. So I found that to be really interesting.
That is so strange. I mean, we sort of have something similar going on specifically here in Ontario where we had issues where protesters were standing in front of hospitals protesting different things. And they were trying to figure out, it's like, where can we safely tell these people that they can protest without blocking a hospital, for example? And it's surprisingly difficult given how the law is set up. So that's fascinating to me that like this kind of small trivial thing of begging for money outside of a grocery store, you have another version of it that goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And I mean, was that in the same, like, was that in Michigan?
It was in Michigan, yeah. It went
That's
to the Michigan Supreme Court, yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Basically, it was saying that you can place limitations on begging just within reason. So like you can't do it, you can place a limitation outside of certain feet outside of schools, like ATMs, bank vestibules, things like that, but you can't just say blanket banning anywhere or like outside of certain businesses, things like that.
That kind of makes a lot of sense, right? Like, again, it's more about the spatial awareness. And again, it's probably frustrating for a grocery store to be like, oh, this person is here again. But it's also like, you can't just take away that person's dignity.
Well, also that is the government who's enforcing that ban too. And so like when you think about, you know, this ties kind of back to that Texas bill, the SB 8 that's going to the United States Supreme Court. And that one of the big questions that's pending before the court is not even whether or not the law is enforceable. It's whether or not the federal government can sue the state over that law, because it's not the state that enforces that law, it's individual people. So it's a problem.
My mind is always blown about how the law functions differently in Canada and the US. Again, we're complete neighbors, but we have very different, as we were talking about earlier, you know, the provinces don't have the same level of power that the states clearly do. So when it goes to a federal level, it functions so differently here. Whereas like, it seems like it's very hot heated battle when it goes to the federal level, in the US. It's not just
it
a
seems
wrist
like that
slap.
to me too. Yeah.
So I guess my last and more fun question for you, Paul, is which TV shows most accurately represent lawyers in the justice system, and is it Night Court?
The Practice. The Practice is a show that I watched when I was like 11 years old on ABC. And that was the show where I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. On that show, though, everyone was like hanging around. There was like a murderous nun involved, kind of got crazy. But I remember watching it being like, yeah, this seems like a job for me.
I remember watching The Practice, and it was just...
It's on Hulu.
It's great. The Practice is a wonderful show. And I love hearing that at least it's mostly accurate. I get the televisions can't, again, do the slow plotting part about things. They have to get to the excitement, right?
I don't even know that it's accurate. It's the one that I enjoyed the most. How about that?
I would like to hope that some writers do their research. I know The Simpsons mostly does with Lionel Hutz. He's a terrible lawyer, but my goodness, like they get a lot of that right, which is kind of funny. And I always love that. I've had many friends who are lawyers tell me about how Lionel Hutz is like the patron saint of what not to be in the profession.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time and talking to us about what you do. I appreciate this, and I've learned so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. And with that, we're going to have somebody else next month. Take care. Goodbye.